Okay. Finance. Of course, as soon as I said that, it went away. Finance, here we go. Okay. Welcome to the Finance Committee for September. Um, we need Finance Committee members to please make an appointment to stop in sometime during the day to sign warrants. I'm understanding that they are piling up, so we need to do that. Is it better to make an appointment? How does that work best, Pat?
No, at this point, it's not necessary to make an appointment. We've already had a couple finance committee members come in the last couple days and sign them. But the office is open at 7:30 and it closes at 4 o'clock.
Okay, great. No, Laurie. In accordance with an act to implement provisions necessary to the health, welfare, and safety of the citizens of Maine in response to the COVID-19 public health emergency as enacted today, Section D11 MRSA 403A, public proceedings through remote access during declaration of the state of emergency to COVID-19, and for 30 days following the termination of that state of emergency, the regular board meeting will be held through Google Meet. The meeting will be live streamed and available for viewing at MSAD11.org. We will now call the meeting to order. I'm wondering if you would call the roll, Pat?
Sure. Jim Lothridge.
Here.
Alyssa Tracy.
Here.
John Umlin.
Here.
Becky Fless.
Here.
Patrick Saucier.
Here.
Nicole Medor.
Here.
Everyone's here, Becky.
Great, thank you. Discussion of the coronavirus relief funds is the first thing on the agenda.
Yeah, it's really the only thing on the agenda.
Yeah.
We didn't have a lot to discuss, but we thought it's been a while since we've met and thought it would be a good idea for us to at least have a brief meeting and for us to bring you up to speed on the status of that funding. Now, as a reminder, we've received different pockets of funding from the federal government. Back in the spring, we were notified that we received some CARES Act money, totaling around $389,000. That money has to be expended by September 2021. There's great flexibility with that money, so we've sat on it at this point. We have not expended it. Then we received the Coronavirus Response Act Fund, which is referred to as the CRF Fund. And I notified you that we received a bit over $1.6 million. This money has to be spent by December 30th of this year. And how we had to submit a budget on how we were going to use this money. That budget was submitted in August. I just thought I would generally review where we designated money. We designated money under facilities, and at the time we put $532,000, thinking our ventilation system was going to need a large investment. Under materials and supplies, we budgeted $103,736.10. Under equipment for food service, those warmers that we've talked about, $14,000. For staffing, we put aside $562,500. For professional development, we put $11,000 aside. And for technology, we put aside $400,000. With the technology, remember that is not all we wanted. That was what we absolutely needed, but we were afraid to request more because we didn't think that we would have enough money. So at this time, what we're finding out is that the use of this fund is far more rigid than what we were originally told. So a lot of the expectations are now just surfacing. For example, we built into this funding all of our subscriptions that we were going to have to pay: Seesaw, upgraded Power School, some Google. And it was our understanding at first that this fund would cover the entire cost. Now we're being told that it will not, that they will prorate it across the course of the year. So that's a concern for us in figuring where that money is going to come from. We've also just received, hot off the press, I think I received this at 5:12 this afternoon. So this is new information that we've received from Siemens. And the ventilation system is not going to cost as much as we had anticipated, which is great. One, the Department of Education, or actually it's the state, I think it's the comptroller, who was concerned with the scope of some of the HVAC upgrades that were being recommended by school districts. And so a lot of those proposals, from what I understand, they were being denied, or at least being really reviewed. What we ended up putting in as a result is we just put in a proposal to provide ventilation system into our isolation rooms. I think this was discussed a couple meetings ago with the entire board. And that alone is going to cost $113,568. And then we did an assessment, a survey of all of our schools and our HVAC systems. And in order to repair them and bring them up where they need to be, it's going to be $32,000, which actually in the scope of things is pretty good. I think it really shows how we've taken care of our HVAC system. So overall, you know, we're looking at about $150,000 for our HVAC system versus what we had anticipated with $500,000. So that's good news. Let's see, we may be able to then, as a result, purchase some of the additional items for technology that Terry had wanted. Just today, we also learned that that there is the potential that we will not be able to use CRF money to cover costs as a result of staff being out for COVID-related purposes. So if you remember a while back, I talked to you about the US Department of Labor rules, that there was a federal, it's called FFRCA, and it's the Families First Act. And it says that if we have a staff member who has to be quarantined, if they're sick, if there's some childcare issues, the first 2 weeks have to be paid for by the school district. So there was thought that, well, because it's COVID related, that we could use these funds to cover the cost of that versus it being the burden of the school district. And we just heard today that that's not true, that we will not be able to use CRF funds, that it will have to be borne by school districts. So I think that is something the state may push back on with the federal government. But for today, we are finding that some of the restrictions may mean that we're not able to spend all of this money, which is not what we had anticipated. We thought it would be very easy for us to spend all of this money given the costs that we have. But because of this new information, I'm not sure that that's going to be the case. So I wanted you to be aware of that. There is talk about a CRF Fund 2 that would come out in maybe in the winter. I was involved in a meeting in which I heard it said that there's a possibility that school districts that don't spend all of their CRF, the first round of funding, that if they don't spend it all, they may not be eligible for the second round, which is really unfortunate, because even if we can't spend the first round, It doesn't mean that we don't need the second round. We're not spending the first round because we're not allowed to absorb all of our costs in this round. We have to spread it out over the course of the year. And the CARES Act money that we have, the $389,000, is just not going to go very far. When we start taking into account the additional nurse that we had to hire, again, we can only pay her salary through December 30th out of this fund. The remote teachers that we're needing to hire, and some of the other staffing issues that we have. So I wanted you to be aware of this additional concern that has just crossed our desk. And I would turn it over to Andrea. You participated in a meeting with business managers about this very topic. Is there anything else that you can add to the conversation about some of the restrictions that are just now coming to light?
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that was discussed during our meeting was that it was very important not to supplant funds from the district and use those monies to purchase those items from the CRF. So during our conversation, it was even discussed that through the oversight that the state would ask for copies of your budget to see whether or not these items were in fact part of your original budget. So as we talk about substitutes, if somebody is sick because they are ill and it's not a CRF, a coronavirus or tied to COVID, then that sub would normally be borne by the district. We can't pay, obviously, those subs out of CRF. Originally, we were talking about calling people our short-term people subs. Then it became confusing with the state. Everybody who isn't employed permanently, we've referred to as subs. We've started calling additional personnel as facility instructors. Is it facility instructors? So that we would not confuse them with actual subs who are substituting for somebody in our building. So it's very every expenditure that we have, you need to look at it to make sure that it fits the CRF grant. So it's not as easy as just spending $1.6 million. There's a lot of thought that needs to go into it.
And I want to be very clear. It's not that the state has just now decided that these are the rules that we have to enforce. This is coming down from the federal government. And the rules and the guidelines were not established when the money was released to the states. And so now they are providing this guidance to the state that they didn't have before. So it's the state trying to enforce the federal guidelines. So I just want to be clear. I don't want this to make it sound like the state is making us jump through all of these hoops. It's really from federal guidance. So that's all we have on the regular CRF fund. I have another grant that I want to share with you, but before we do, I guess I would open it up for questions and comments.
So I don't understand why we wouldn't have purchased these remote curriculums like Seesaw. We wouldn't have purchased these licenses if we didn't need to be remote. So is this a displeasure on the part of the federal government that we've opened school in the hybrid manner that we have? I mean, if we've needed to operate in the way we believe we needed to, and they can certainly, I would hand over the budget and say, show us where Seesaw is in our budget. That's how is that? And what are we supposed to, if we're going to operate remotely because it's the safest way to be, what are we supposed to use to teach the kids, the children? What's their answer to that? Is there an answer to that?
I don't know. I can't answer that question. That's just rhetorical, right? I mean, I don't know the rationale for the federal government. I mean, that was our opinion, that if we were purchasing the license or the subscription for Seesaw for Power School, some other licenses, that we were doing so because we needed to in order to function in a remote world or to be able to live stream, all of those things. But for whatever reason, we're being told that we cannot upfront that cost, that it will be prorated, and they will only cover from the start of the school year through December 30th. So I'm really hopeful that this CRF2 comes in, because we're going to need those funds to help cover the second half of some of these expenses.
Is there something we could do to use the CRF funds in an acceptable way if we haven't already paid those bills? And does that, Andrea, you're making a face, so I don't.
So it's, Becky, it's not that it's not in an unacceptable way. They only are agreeing to pay for expenses through December 30th. That is their drop dead deadline.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
as Pat was saying, for the nurse, we can only pay for the nurse's salary and benefits through December 30th. And then everything needs to be moved over, at least for the time being, to the CARES Act. I don't really think it's them weighing in on what we are doing. It's just their agreement to only pay for things during this. It's a very certain period of time. And then after that, it's done. So don't read into it anything.
Okay. I mean, I don't really
Okay.
want
So
to.
it-
I just don't understand it. It doesn't make sense.
So have we officially been told no to the curriculum items? I mean, have we been specific and asked and then told no by the state?
The state has said during our phone calls that they will not pay for any software or anything after December 30th. So if we've paid for an annual license agreement, I'm going to have to go in and appropriate it for the months that fall within the CRF and then hit another funding source for the remainder, unless we get CRF Part 2.
Can we contact the companies that we're doing business with and see if they will, provide us what we need, with the thought that more money probably will be coming after the new year?
So for now, we've
Because
paid
I'm sure there are a lot of school districts across the country in the same boat doing the same type of business with these same companies, right?
but these licenses have already been paid in full. So we'll just need to find the funding source for the remainder. I don't think, Terry, do you have an idea off the top of your head how much our software is? I mean, I don't think it's the bulk of what was purchased. Do you have an idea? Is she ignoring me?
I think she's looking. But that's just an example. The other information is that for products and materials that we purchase, we have to have them in hand before December 30th, or you have to have the work done before December 30th. So if there are items that are back ordered that we're not going to be able to receive until January or February, and I'm not saying that we're in that situation, I'm not certain, we would not be able to use this funding source to pay for those items.
Does that include any of our IT stuff that's on back order?
Yeah.
It would if we don't receive it before December 30th, yes.
So our isolation rooms, we've paid for 25% of the cost because they've done 25% of the work. It will be very important that they complete the work on the isolation rooms prior to the December 30th deadline so that we can pay that bill.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I will transition us a little bit. I also have some good news.
I have a question before you leave.
Oh, sure. Go
I
ahead,
was
Jim.
trying to get that apart with my question marks. If we have this money, I don't know how much we've got left, but can we use it for something that's completely was out of our line of sight originally? I mean, is this now, can we revisit the money and where we spend it? Or are we limited to what we've basically talked to them about prior to this date?
We are limited to some degree to what we've already talked to them about, kind of like the categories. Now, we have the ability by the end of this month, so I don't have much time left. By the end of this month, I can go in and I can rework the dollar amounts. So if we've overstated how much we're going to spend for HVAC and spend on our facilities, I can shift that money elsewhere. But it's my understanding that the categories that we developed in our initial application can't change.
The reason I ask this, I know we've gotten some direction from the state regarding what about sports for this upcoming year, where we won't be able to do football, I understand, and soccer appears to be okay, but because they're indoor sports, volleyball and basketball seem to be pushed off to the side. And what I'm asking about is, could we take some of this money and build some outside facilities that would meet those two areas, basketball and volleyball?
As I looked at the criteria that was provided to us from the Department of Education, I don't believe that there are any expenses for athletics that we can cover out of this fund. I don't have the wording in front of me, Jim, but it's very clear that it's for instruction. It is for the day school program. Athletics is a volunteer event, an opportunity for students. It's not something that's mandated for them to receive their education. Therefore, we can't spend that money on athletics.
It'd have to be done before 30 December anyway.
Correct.
Well, actually, I went to, John Umlin and I were both at a basketball facility in Winslow, is it, John? Windsor. And just a great outside facility, strictly designed towards basketball, but it could be easily converted to volleyball. So it could be take our indoor sports and move them outdoors.
Mhm.
That's all I was thinking about. I'm not talking about trying to spend the whole amount on something like that, but they built a pretty nice facility for a reasonable amount of money, I thought.
Mhm.
So anyways, if we end up with money that we can't spend someplace, and I don't think it would take that long to build this facility, if it's even possible, but I'd certainly at least like to explore it if there's an opportunity to move into that. I don't want to take it away from academics. I don't want to take it away from technology or anything else that we need. But if there's money that's going to go back to the federal government and there's any way we can use it for it, I would like to see if we couldn't. That's all.
Jim can ask the question. I will ask the question just to confirm that my interpretation of the language is correct.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And just to clarify, when it's federal funds, the feds never send us 1.6 million. It's on a reimbursement basis. So in order to get the money back, I will have to submit invoices and backup to the state. And if they don't like what we have done, they will just cross it off and reimburse less the amounts that they don't like. So, and then it will be on us. So I just wanted to let any people know that we're not returning money to the feds.
So it makes it especially even more important that we get it right the first time, because we don't want to incur a cost that the fund is not going to reimburse. So, but on a good note, I'm sorry, John.
Yeah, is there anything that we could do with traffic flow patterns at the schools? With the increased drop off of parents, is there something that, whether it's a widening of a driveway, I don't know, just is there a budget line item that you could allocate that to?
I don't know if that would fall under facilities or not. I would have to ask that question.
I mean, that would be, I mean, just thinking of like the high school, right? The flow pattern that we've discussed many times before all this happened, that was approximately 1.2 million, but there were other options as well. Maybe we can have increased traffic flow, you know, and if the work can be done quickly, that's something that's a big ticket item.
Yeah, I will have to ask that question for confirmation. I think one of the biggest challenges is the work has to be completed and paid for, if approved, by December 30th.
Yeah,
That
totally
doesn't give us
understood.
much time. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would like to make a comment when everybody's done.
Okay.
I guess I can make it now.
Yep.
You know, I think we need to be responsible with this money. It's
Mhm.
it isn't necessarily a blank check for us to just try to come up with things that we can spend it on. You know, it is taxpayer dollars even at the federal level. We just need to be very mindful of if we don't need to be spending it, we don't need to spend it. And if we have to give some back, we give it back. There'll be other districts and other places throughout the country that might need it. So I just wanted to make that comment. Obviously, if we can use the money on things that are needed, then great. But I don't think we need to really get creative and, you know, come up with projects, if you will, to get, in other words, take advantage of the situation. I don't think we should even be doing that. So I just wanted to make sure that I got that out off my chest.
Alyssa?
Yeah, I appreciate what you're saying, Matt. I know John and I worked on some federal grants at the state level, so I would just say I appreciate Andrea's position and knowing as much as she can about what to do. But if we can at least try to get into that phase 2, I think that would be a good thing to try to do within, you know, jurisdiction, Matt, to your point, not just anything, but at least so we could get potential for another set of money. Just a thought. So I know you guys are already thinking that, I'm sure, but
Mhm.
it's kind of hard when you don't get all the rules and then they change. So, and I was going to make a comment about audit, but Andrea, you kind of confirmed they're just waiting to
Yeah.
reimburse. So that makes sense. Yeah.
So 2 things to follow up on what Matt said. I believe the state is going to use some of the CRF money to cover the revenue shortfall. As we all have discussed in prior meetings, while we are not going to have a curtailment this year, the likelihood of having one in a future year as the revenues continue to decline becomes more like reality. And as far as the audit, with federal money, not only do we have our regular audit, but there's also an audit at the state level and an additional audit at the local level because of the amount of federal funds. Hank is going to be required to audit that grant. So there are going to be a lot of sets of eyes on this. So it's important that we do it well and we do it right the first time.
Becky? You're muted.
To Matt's point, the state was very clear when they addressed athletics last week that high school or public school athletics are voluntary and they are not. That was how the MPA was able to create a line, a spot for themselves, was to really delineate that it's voluntary. Athletics are voluntary, and our academics are not voluntary. So I'm guessing that they would look at those monies differently than what we might like, even though it would be very fun to build some outdoor activity centers for our kids. I think they won't look at it that way. It would be inconsistent, I think, if they did that.
Other comments? Then let me share with you another funding source that we are now accessing. We learned on, I think it was like Friday, August 21st, the state put out notice that they were going to have a day programming CRF fund. And what this meant is it was for daycares and those types of entities to try to provide some resources for families who now were going to have daycare needs since so many schools were going to be doing the hybrid model. And so we were notified on the 21st and the application was due on September 4th. So we didn't have a lot of time. We had to turn it around pretty quickly. But we had Donna Seepy help us along with Ingrid Stanchfield from the Boys and Girls Club. And because the Boys and Girls Club was already a known entity, we were able to work with them to secure some funding. We were just notified late Friday afternoon that our application was approved. It's for $130,000. And again, it's only good through December 30th. And what it's going to allow is it's going to allow the Boys and Girls Club to provide daycare or care for our students who are not in school, 108 of them each week. And students who are in grades K through 8, there would be 42 students who participate in cohort A, 42 students in cohort B, and 24 middle school students. And the grant will pay for the cost of the child care during the school hours for those families. So the families will not have to pay for that cost. So if they choose to have daycare before school or daycare after school, still that is going to be owned by the family. But this is an incredible opportunity for 108 of our students to, their families will not be charged for them to participate in the day school program. Because of the short turnaround that we had, unfortunately, we were not able to invite other community daycare centers to participate. So should there be another round, should we have a little more opportunity, that is certainly something I would like to do to make sure that other daycares have a similar opportunity so that they could provide day school programming for their students without their families needing to pay for it. Now, Nicole, this is part of her day job. And so I don't know, Nicole, is there anything that you can add to what I just shared?
Yeah, so I would just add that while this is a fantastic opportunity, when I first got wind of it for work purposes, I think I was the most excited person in the state of Maine for approximately 10 minutes, and then news spread. So this is a huge opportunity. If schools can apply for it, like Pat said, it's not anything that you have to do, but it's the students that it's aimed to eliminate the cost of care for is very specific. So like we first have to look at students who are residents in our district who are also children of essential workers, so that they get first priority. Once those students are covered, then we can look at the students who qualify for free and reduced lunch, who are economically disadvantaged. We call it econ dis. And then after those students are covered, they have to be residents, of course, of the district. Then we can look at all other resident students, including those of staff members, whether they're a resident or not. So it's sort of like a 3-tier, let's cover the first priority, second priority, third priority. So it's really fantastic. So the state was awarded, or the governor gave us, for lack of a better term, $25 million. And so far we've reviewed 48 districts that have applied, and we've not committed half of that. So I'm confident that it'll go out again. So it's definitely something to be thinking of. And I imagine that, of course, in our communities, the Boys and Girls Club is a natural partner just because of the sheer numbers that they can reach and just their known presence in our community. But we have a number of other private childcares that serve our families as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if, I told Pat today, if they personally reach out to you and say, hey, you know, I want to take advantage of this too. So so it's a great opportunity.
Nicole,
Thank you, Nicole.
can I ask Nicole a question? Can you explain again the difference between priority 1 and priority 2?
Yeah, so priority 1 is any resident student whose parents are essential workers. So
Okay.
first responders and
Great.
anything that qualifies for that. And that might sort of dually cover a staff member who happens to live in the district.
Great.
Yep.
Thank you.
Welcome.
And that's all we have for an agenda. So if there are questions, Patrick.
Yeah, I was just wondering, with these monies, Nicole, does that also go to, you said private daycares, is that considered the home daycare? Because I know they changed the classifications of daycares over the years. So private daycares will also be included.
Yeah,
in-
absolutely.
Okay.
All of the district has to be the funder, it's
Fiscal agent?
the clock brain. Thank you, the fiscal agent. So everything will, in that scenario, Patrick, a private daycare would just sort of invoice the district for that particular student's cost of care during the school hours that they were there in a hybrid model. So there's a lot to sort of consider, but some places have applied to expand into community settings. So if a private childcare doesn't have the space to physically accommodate more students, but there's a church down the road that has an empty room, then we could move into that space for the next few months, pay for that rent, pay for that staffing, whatever it entails. I mean, it's districts have been really creative around the state around how they're going to accommodate this for some of their families. It's been pretty impressive.
Thank you.
Jim?
Yeah, when we do the minutes on this meeting, I'm still a little, I don't want you to rehash it again, but could you include the difference between the category 1, category 2, and category 3 so that I can read it and digest it? And I just couldn't quite follow the whole line through. So, but that would be nice. Thank you.
Yes, we will try to add that. We may need Nicole to help us just to make sure that we capture it correctly, but.
Yep.
And I have one more question for Nicole. If we are the fiscal agent, Nicole, and I am reimbursing the daycares directly, is there any liability on the district? In other words, if I reimburse somebody, and is there a chance that the state won't reimburse us for the costs?
No, my understanding is as long as it's in that budgeted line, like it's a similar budget to the other CRF funding, and there's a column for contracted services. So if you're going to contract with Busy Bear for staffing, as long as that amount is there and explained, there shouldn't be any issues.
Great, thank you.
So I have a quick question. So is the monies are going to actually be paid, for example, to the Boys and Girls Club of the Greater Gardner area, right?
Yes.
Okay. None of that's going to go to the Chelsea chapter of the Boys and Girls Club?
No, this is directly with just MSAD11.
Okay. All right.
It's a good question. Yeah, RSU 12 could have submitted its own application with the Boys and Girls Club.
Yeah. I just thought I'd ask.
It's a good question. Any other questions? Nicole, thank you for your help.
I have one more quick question. If there are private daycare, there's several in Pittston, I know, and I'm sure there are throughout the area. Who is the contact person within the district for it, or is there one, or do they need to contact the district to tell you that they would like to be considered in the next go round, if there is one?
We'll have to figure that out, Jim. I was the contact. Donna CP helped me work with the Boys and Girls Club, and we'll have to see how much time we have between when the applications become available and how we notify and fold those childcare entities into the application process. So we'll just have to see how that works out. I'd like to send a letter, but I'm not even sure who all of those childcare centers are. Actually, Angela might have a better idea. I know that she recently participated in a meeting with like 24 different daycares in the area. So she may be able to help with that.
Yeah, that was my concern, that if we get under the gun, there's a short window to get the paperwork in,
Mhm.
and we have no way of contacting people to see if they're truly interested. I'd rather have, and I'm not suggesting you, believe me, I know you're busy as can be, but somebody to call and say, I'm interested, at least to get an address and a telephone number so we could contact them. That's all my thought is, just be prepared.
Yep. No, it's a good thought if we're able to, in anticipation of, now that we know that there may be a next round, if we can identify those childcare programs and those contacts, we could send out a letter saying, if this becomes available, is it something that you're interested in?
Nicole, are there specific requirements around what a daycare needs to be for consideration at all? It just,
So this was kind of a thorn in my side. It's very loose. You don't even, for this short period of time, this window, you don't even have to be licensed, which doesn't sit well with me, quite honestly. We're more apt to follow suit with those that have a current and license. But no, you could. So that sort of goes to my example before, like if there's a space in a church that's not licensed to be a childcare. However, for these purposes, we could use it to accommodate more students.
all right. I just, to Jim's point, I wasn't sure how prudent it would be to put it in the district if there were qualifications or clarifications around that at all, but seemingly there aren't. I wonder if maybe just Terry could create an email account for daycares or something, that if you're interested, email it here.
Mhm.
Somebody's, just a thought.
So Becky, that's all we have. You're muted, Becky.
I'm trying to unmute. My thing keeps going down below. Yeah. Okay. I don't. Any future agenda items that people are wanting to talk about other than everything and being kept up to date?
Pretty soon we'll start putting budget things on the agenda.
Yes, we will.
And next month, will we have our audit back yet?
The auditor is waiting for me to do an MDA, and I'm trying to catch up on 5 weeks of work from the summer.
So maybe November.
November, I would think. Yep.
Okay.
And he can't go to finance. He needs to come to the full board as statute says.
Yes.
So it won't be the audit. It won't be finance.
Okay.
All right.
Can I ask a non-agenda question? It's still finance related, but I'm just asking about, I'm wondering whatever happened or what proceeded with the solar panels.
Oh yeah.
We have started receiving small credits. I think some of this COVID has put people behind, but the credits are starting to trickle in. So we're starting to see our first credits. So,
Excellent.
but for this year, however, I have booked the full amount of our electricity, not knowing how things, and then based on this year, I will make adjustments to next year's budget.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. Thank you, Andrea.
You're welcome.
Anything else from board members?
Just appreciate the updates and how diligent you are about everything. So thank you, Andrea, Pat, and team.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Terry, I hope you have a very happy birthday. You make 17 look great. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. We'll see you all soon.
Good night. Thank you.
Bye.